Hey guys, I'm AJ. I'm here with Pastor Dustin and Janine, and we just started our Blueprint series yesterday. And this morning, what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the message that Pastor Dustin preached yesterday. Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's go.
All right,
This is
ready?
awesome.
All right. First question: the divorce rate in America is over 50%. Why do you think that is?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think there's a lot of reasons. I think first and foremost that we have men and women coming together with different experiences, different upbringings, different thought processes, different perspectives, different opinions, different. And you bring these people together who've been doing things their own way, and you bring them together, and now they have to do things not their own way anymore, right? That's difficult. Like, we like to do stuff our way, and I think that's expectations are brought in, and usually not communicated. So when I got married, I had expectations. Ashley had expectations. We never communicated those expectations. So it's like, oh no, what are we going to do? Because she's not meeting my expectations, I'm not meeting her expectations, and that's a problem. Like, that's a big problem. So, and I know you're single, right? So, like, when you think about getting married, like, that's a big thing. Like, what are your expectations for marriage? How do you communicate those to your future spouse? And then finding out what her expectations are, and like help her communicate those expectations to you, and together you can kind of do that. But I think that is missing in relationships. And what do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right. And our culture is a very, like, if it doesn't work for you, then cut it out of your life. And so when you get into those marriages where, like, the communication is bad and expectations aren't communicated, and things are not the way that you thought they were going to be, not like, the fairy princess Disney fairy tale that, so many of us were sold as children. And they're like, oh, well, this isn't working for me, so boundaries, bye, cut you out of my life. And instead of working through it and learning how to communicate together, people would rather just call it quits.
Yeah, so we are a quitting culture. Like, that's just who we are, man. If something's not working, we stop and we do something different. It's just like with losing weight or going to the gym or whatever it is. If it's not working right away and you don't see results, most people quit. I mean, that's just there's no commitment anymore to anything. And I think that's a great point. But I think the overarching reason is because there's an enemy, right? That Satan wants to steal, kill, and destroy marriages. And I think he does that because, one, it's a God-ordained relationship. That God created marriage, but a man and a woman for one lifetime. And that's the ideal marriage that God ordains. And the enemy knows, hey, if I can get in there, if I can tear that apart, then it doesn't just mess with those two people. It is a generational thing when that happens. So he's going after one relationship and affecting multiple relationships. And he would love nothing more than to tear down what God has built. And I think we lose sight of that. There's a real enemy that's fighting. I heard a pastor say one time that when you get the wedding, after the wedding, the war starts. Like, so there's a war after the wedding, and the war is not against each other, but it's against the enemy. It's a spiritual war that we're fighting.
And a lot of times we fight each other.
Yes.
And that's the problem. Like, you look at your spouse and your spouse is the problem. And, like, really, no, it's you too.
Yeah.
And it's the enemy. And when we did our marriage counseling, we went through, it's called I Marriage, little I, with Andy Stanley. And, like, one of the biggest things I remember about that is, like, it's a little I because we're both little I's, and the big I is Jesus. Right. And so when you build on that foundation of your marriages on Jesus, and you communicate those expectations, and you think about each other first, then it's easy to make yourself little and make your spouse a bigger deal.
Yeah, that's good.
Right. And a lot of people don't see it that way. And that was probably one of the biggest takeaways for us with doing our premarital counseling, was that right there with communicating expectations, and it's not easy, and I'm bad at it. I'm bad at it. And like Gerald tells me all the time, like, hey, I can't read your mind. You got to tell me, what you're thinking, like what you need. And so that's something I actively work on. But that was a huge shift for us right before we got married, to go in with that thought of like, oh, we got to communicate the expectations, and it's about Jesus and not about each other.
For sure. Yeah. So, I mean, just to wrap that up, I think it's different people coming together as one, and then the enemy trying to tear that apart.
Yeah.
And if we're not built on the foundation of Jesus, if he's not the rock of our relationship, it's just not going to work, man. And we just choose to quit because the grass is always greener somewhere else. Yeah. And that's the lie that the enemy has tried to sell us over and over and over in every area of life. The world always overpromises and under-delivers, always. Like it can never satisfy. So we're always looking for that next thing. So there's really no commitment to the marriage. It's just man, as long as this is going well, we're in. When it starts to go bad, we're out. And that's what we're seeing over and over and over in our country.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, those are good points. And back to the generational thing, we are a lazy generation. And there's this post I've seen go around on Facebook several times over the years where a younger guy asks an elderly gentleman, like, why do you, like this exact question, why do you think the divorce rate has gone up so much? And the older gentleman basically says, back in my day, we worked to fix what was broken. We didn't just throw something away and get something new just because part of it was broken. We put forth effort, and sometimes it can't be fixed, but if you don't try, then it won't get fixed. You can't make it better. So I definitely like, those are great points. I definitely agree with that. Next question. What would you say to someone who has been divorced and is starting over at an older age?
Yeah, that's good. So I'm going to let Janine kind of answer that, but I will say this because I said it yesterday. The ideal marriage, right? The biblical godly marriage is one woman, one man for one lifetime. And when that ideal isn't met, when divorce does happen, that God's grace is bigger than any mistake, than any failure. So I think that's what people have to understand and have to get to that place that God's grace is bigger than the failure, bigger than the divorce.
Right.
So starting over, I think it starts there. First and foremost is that they know who they are in Christ as a Christ follower, and understanding that his grace is sufficient, that his grace is bigger. And like starting over starts there. It starts with identity in him, I think.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head with that, because I think growing up in the churches that I grew up in, like divorce was always like the ultimate thing. Like you get divorced, like, oh no.
Oh yeah, you're done.
Like you're done. Like you can't be in ministry, you can't be a pastor, you can't do anything. And who's to say that's the truth? You know, like I don't think it's any worse than any other sin that people like to sweep under the rug, and it has to be dealt with the same, right? But it's grace. Yeah. There's grace for it all, and God's grace covers that. And it almost felt like, to me, like when I'd see that happen to my friends, like that God's grace couldn't cover that, you know? And it's not the truth. It covers everything.
Yeah.
And it's like, we are imperfect people. We make mistakes. Things happen that are out of our control, and there's still grace for that. Yeah. And starting over after a divorce, I think identity is key. Know who you are in Christ. Know that he loves you and you are his, and cultivate that relationship first before you jump into anything else. Like cultivate that, become like closer to him than anything else, and then let him like really kind of lead and guide your life at that point. Cause like maybe he does have someone for you to start over with, and that's awesome. Like that's a gift, and you'll know it when you're close to him, and he'll make that known to you.
Yeah. So I think it starts the same whether you're a man or a woman.
Yeah.
But then I do think it kind of, there's a different path, I think. And this may sound a little weird, but I think it starts with Jesus, right?
Yeah.
You got to be okay being single and being alone.
Yeah.
So this goes for whether you're starting over or whether you've never been married, right? You have to be in a place in your life where you're okay with just you and Jesus.
Yeah.
That's an okay place to be. the Apostle Paul would say, like, that's a great place to be because all your
Right.
focus can be on Jesus, right? So you got to get there, whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're just single and never married or divorced, that you got to get to that point, that your
Yeah.
identity is in him. But then I think for women specifically, you have to get to a point where you know that you are a daughter of the Most High God,
Yes.
and that's your value and that's your
Right.
worth. And you don't settle for anything less than that.
Right. And
Like-
the divorce doesn't devalue you.
That's correct. Yeah, the divorce doesn't make you any less valuable.
right.
God says you are worthy, that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. Like his works are wonderful, and you are one of those works.
Right.
So know it full well. And I think for women, they have to solidify that in their
Yeah.
life. And then I think for men, you have to know that you are pursuing or trying to marry one of God's daughters, and you should
Yeah.
treat her like that. So you have to be the man that he's called you to be so that you can treat his daughter the way that
Yes.
he's called you to treat her. So the way I try to look at this, like when I'm counseling guys, is if it was your daughter, would you let you marry her?
Yeah.
And it's like, man, you got to become the spouse that your spouse is looking for. And that's another Andy Stanley thing,
Yeah.
right? So be the one that your one is looking for.
Right.
And for men, you have to value the daughter of God. And as a daughter of God, you just have to know your worth and know your value. But it all starts with him. And he's the identity. He's enough. And if he blesses you with another relationship, praise him for that. If he
Right.
doesn't, praise him for that too.
Absolutely.
All right. Pastor Dustin, you said information should lead to application. Can you explain a little bit what that looks like?
Yeah, I can. I got a little, excited yesterday a little bit during this part because we get information. We're information overload in this
Yeah.
country. Like we can get information anywhere, not just this country, in the world, really. We can get information anytime we want it, any type of information that we want. People come to church every Sunday. They go to life groups. They do whatever, do devotions, and they get all this information. And I've seen over and over in ministry, like it leads to no life change. There's no application to the information. And in the Sermon on the Mount, that's how Jesus ends the Sermon on the Mount. He gives so much information, and then he says, for those of you who hear these words and do them, like you apply them to your life, you will be like a wise man who builds his house on the rock. But if you hear these words and you don't do them, you don't apply them, there is no application, then you're like a foolish man and you build your house on the sand. So application is important. And man, I'm gonna be just straight up. Like I get fed up with the pretending.
Yeah.
And the information is getting to you and then you're doing nothing with it. And you pretend to be one way here and you're completely different somewhere else. And man, that is so unbiblical. And you are a foolish person if you do that. And I know firsthand because I've been there and I've done that foolish thing and I've seen it crumble down because the storms come,
Yeah.
the winds blow, the rain falls, and your house is either going to stand or it's going to crumble. And it really depends on, man, are you really applying this? Are you building your house on the firm foundation of the gospel of Jesus or not? And we have a church in America that is full on Sundays. There's churches everywhere that have people coming every single week just to go to church and check a box. And there's no application. And there's just no other area in your life where you can get all the information and not apply it and see the results that you want. It just doesn't work that way. If you want to see results in any area, but especially your marriage, then you have to apply the information that you're learning and not just talk about it or get more and more information like that. It's good to do that, but it does nothing for you if you don't apply it. Yeah, I get a little worked up about that. So
That's okay though. Like, I mean, you're right, because people that come to church and they have a good head knowledge about the Lord, but it never makes it to their heart.
Mm-hmm.
And they go out and just live their life the same as they do every other day of the week. Like coming to church on Sunday, check off the box that you came, go home, and nothing's different.
Yeah, we just went through the book of Romans, right? 26, 27 weeks of going through the book of Romans. And Paul was very clear that here's the gospel. And then when the gospel infects your life, you begin to live differently. And if you're not living differently, you have to ask yourself, has the gospel really affected my life?
Right.
Have I really surrendered my life to Jesus? You could come in this building or anywhere else in the world and say, I'm a Christian. And that doesn't make you a Christian, right? It doesn't make you a Christ follower. So have you experienced the grace of God in your life? Have you experienced the gospel? Has it been real in your life? Is it personal? And if it is, then your life should be different. You should be applying that. And if you're not, man, then just stop pretending and say it. Say, I haven't surrendered my life to Jesus and I need to do that, because that's the first step. And again, I said this yesterday, I can't tell you how to be married if you don't know Jesus.
Right.
Like, if you don't have his love inside of you, there's no way you can love your spouse in the way that you're supposed to love them. Right. We don't have the capacity to do that. So, information should always lead to application. And if it doesn't, then what's the point of getting the information? I could talk about this one all day.
Yeah.
I'll let you move on.
And I mean, like, this kind of goes along with anything, right? Like, when you're in school, you learn stuff for the test.
Mm-hmm.
So you apply it for the test, and then boom, done, over with, class is over. This is different because this is life. And marriage is not a 90-minute test and then you're done. It's supposed to be a lifetime commitment. I mean, that's what you do when you say those vows.
Yep.
So if you get that information, like in marriage counseling, you use it for a little bit and then you quit applying it, like you're failing that test, right?
Right.
Yes.
So I mean, like, you have to take the information you're given, like you said, and continuously apply it. It's not just for a season, just for a moment. It's continuous application.
That's right. It's nonstop.
That's right. Okay. You kind of called out the men yesterday and challenged them to stop pretending, close the gap between good intentions and action. Can you go into more detail about that a little bit?
Of course. Yeah, I just started that.
Close together.
Yeah, because what I'll hear often is, man, I intend to do this, or I really want to do this. These are my intentions. My motive's really good. It's like, man, that's awesome, but that's not enough. You got to close the gap between good intentions and action. And what we're seeing and what we've seen over the last 30 or 40 years, especially in the church, is that men, the gap has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger between intention and action. And our marriages and families and churches will never be what God has called them to be until men can close that gap. It's not just men, I mean women too, but I did call out the men yesterday because they should be leading this.
Right.
I just get tired of hearing over and over that I want to be different. I want to do better. I want. The intention's there, but there is no action to back it up. And this gap is getting bigger and bigger. And guess what happens? When the gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger, then his wife, the relationship, their intimacy gets further and further and further apart because it's just causing chaos in the relationship. And there's got to be a point in your life where you say, yep, my intentions are good, and you need good intentions. That's what Jesus is talking about in Sermon on the Mount. Like, your motive matters, but then the action has to follow. I didn't mean to hurt her feelings, or I didn't mean to cuss at the kids, or I didn't mean to send this picture to this girl who's not my wife, or I didn't mean to do. Yeah. So the motive at that point, okay, cool, your motive was good, but your action was horrible.
Yeah.
So you just got to close the gap between the good intention and the right action. And the way to do that, man, is just to surrender more and more to Jesus. And I know that sounds cliche, but that is the answer. Like, you have to surrender it to Jesus and allow him to change your life.
It's at the heart of the inaction, no matter what your intention is, the heart of the inaction is selfishness.
Yes.
And so the more selfish you are, the bigger that gap stays. Right? And that keeps growing and keeps growing because you're never going to act on those motives and those intentions if you're selfish.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you surrender to Jesus and you lay yourself down, then you start closing that gap. But you've got to address the selfishness first.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I mean, the call to follow Jesus is the call to die to yourself every day.
Yeah.
And I think we missed that, man. In the American church, the Western church in general.
Yes.
We missed the fact that, man, we are called as Christ followers to die to ourselves every day.
Yeah.
And if we could do that, then I think that gap begins to shrink because it's no longer us. We're trying to live our life to glorify him, and our marriage is part of that glorification of him. So, we got to get to that point that men can wake up in the morning and say, hey, today I die to myself.
Yeah.
And mean it and lay their self at the feet of Jesus every single day, their desires, their passions. And it doesn't mean that they can't pursue things that God's called them to do. I mean, he's put passions in our life, but we have to get to a place where it's not all about us. And that's a hard place to get.
And I think too, as wives, like we have to allow our husbands to get there.
Yeah.
Like no matter the hurt or anything in the past, like instead of being bitter, like we've got to give them grace to try to be that person, to try to die to themselves and allow them to do that instead of, like you said yesterday, nagging them and sending them out to the desert, right? Like, we got to speak life over our marriages and over our families. And I think that's one of the biggest strengths of a wife in the home is that speaking life. But I think it gets hard.
For sure.
When wives have been like, I guess, beaten down, like not physically necessarily, but like they've just lived in that environment to where like there is no motivation, there is no action, there's nothing. And so of course they don't think this time's going to be the one that sticks, right? But I think they always have to give grace and not become the bitter woman, but always the woman full of grace. And that doesn't mean a doormat and being run over and setting boundaries when needed, but give your husband the space to be able to grow.
Yeah, I'm sure that's tough to do. So Ephesians 5, right, it talks about wives submit to your husbands, and then husbands love your wives as Christ loved the church. So honestly, it's like 2 verses for wives, and then it's a bunch of verses for husbands. Like this is what you're supposed to do. But one of the questions you have to ask as a man is, am I worth submitting to?
Yeah.
And like, am I leading? Am I loving? Am I living for her? And there's a lot of men in the church that aren't worth submitting to.
Yeah.
And it's because of selfishness. So there's got to come a point where they die to themselves every day. And me too, right? I got to die to myself every single day. And it is one of the hardest things to do as a Christian and as a man is to just kind of lay yourself down. But it's what we're called to do. So that's the best way to close that gap between intention and action.
Yeah.
What is mutual submission?
Yep, that's good. So mutual submission is honestly husband and wife submitting to one another. Yeah. And submission, I mean, it's really not a bad word. It's making them more important than yourself. So, for instance, like I make Ashley's deal a bigger deal than my deal. Like that's me submitting to her, and then she makes my deal a bigger deal than her deal, and that's her submitting to me. And if you're always trying to serve and love your spouse, and they're always trying to serve and love you, then together you're submitted to one another. And it's all under the banner of Christ. Yeah. We submit to him because he is the Savior of the world, the King of the universe, our Father. And because we're both submitted to him, then we submit to each other. And the closer we get to him, it's like a triangle, right?
Yep.
And we're on the bottom corners. The closer we get to him, the closer we get to each other. So that's really what mutual submission is. It's not a dictatorship type thing or anything like that. It's a mutual respect and love and honor of each other. So it's pretty simple, man. It's just the church has kind of messed this up a little bit because they focus on the woman always submitting to the husband, and that's biblical, right? But what that really means is that like God has ordained the structure of the relationship as the man is the head of the house and the woman submits, but that doesn't mean that he runs everything and that he's the authoritative figure all the time. Like Ashley is authoritative in many areas of our marriage for sure. But together we're submitted to one another because we're both Jesus followers and we're submitted to him. And it's just the way that he has designed it to be.
We talk about prayer all the time at church, but why do you think prayer is so important to a marriage?
Yeah, why would it not be, man? Prayer is it, bro. Really, what you got to define what prayer is, I think. And I think a lot of people don't really understand what prayer is. I think a lot of people, you can tell me if you think I'm missing this, but I think a lot of people treat prayer like an act of some sort. So they're trying to script and play this role in a prayer, and it's just words being said.
It's a checkbox.
Yeah, and it's not a personal conversation, and you can hear that with fancy words and different stuff, and that's not prayer. Prayer is literally communion with God, a conversation, a two-way conversation, and we miss that all the time too. So prayer, here's the answer, like just the basic, simple answer, is that God is the power source for all things. And prayer is the way that we can stay plugged into the power source. I mean, that's what prayer is. It's a way for us to stay plugged in. And in marriage, we need His power. I've been married almost 15 years now, and I've needed His power the whole time, and I'm going to continue to need His power. So prayer is just a way to plug into the source that is God, that like He is omnipotent. So having that ability because of Jesus, a direct access to the Father, and He tells us to pray. So that's one reason we do it, because He tells us to do it, and it's a command. But also just to stay connected to Him. So if He's really the center of everything, we have to stay connected. And then once we disconnect, He is no longer the center of our relationship.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
I agree. And also, too, like when you have problems in your marriage, like who's going to know how to fix them? It's Jesus.
Yes.
And like, so prayer and praying for your spouse and about whatever's going on, even if it's not them, even if you're like facing something together, like that's where the power comes from. That's where the peace comes from. That's where the strength to stand up under whatever's happening comes from. Like without prayer, without Jesus, like we're going to crumble.
We are. And here's what prayer does, man. So prayer changes, one thing it does is it changes your heart.
Yeah.
So when you start praying for someone, it changes your heart for that person.
Yep.
So if you're bitter, if there's some unforgiveness, if there's some issues happening, when you start praying for your spouse, not about them, like there's a difference between praying about someone and praying for someone. You start praying for them, they're like, just watch, just wait, because the Spirit begins to change your heart towards that situation, towards that person. And another thing is we have to get out of the mindset that we're praying to get something. Yeah, well, we're praying for something to happen, and we really want that to happen, but that's not the point of the prayer.
Right.
The point of the prayer isn't that we get what we want. The point of the prayer is that we get Jesus and that we understand His will. And we see that Jesus was the perfect example of that in the garden. Right? He's praying, and He ends that prayer with, "Not my will, but your will be done." Because He knew that prayer was a connection to the power source and that it was God's will that was most important. So He wasn't praying to get what He wanted. He was praying to get God. And I think that's a fundamental difference between prayer, because a lot of people pray to get what they want, and they don't pray just to get God.
Yeah, He's not Santa Claus.
Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't mean, and He tells you to bring your petitions to Him and to ask Him for things and to keep asking 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 and to never stop. But we don't pray to get what we ask for.
Right.
Like, that's not the goal. The goal is that we get to commune with God in that conversation and share our wants and our desires, but still at the end say, "Not my will, but your will be done." And we know that His will in marriage is for one man, one woman for one lifetime. So if that's His will and we're praying for His will to be done and we can get out of the way of that, then obviously His will is for that marriage to last and to work. No, it doesn't mean that you married the right person, right? Maybe you married the wrong person. And it's a struggle because you married the wrong person.
Yeah. Because
you weren't listening to God and you did what you wanted to anyway. So, yeah, I'm not saying that prayer is going to make everything better. I'm saying that it keeps God at the center of the relationship. And without that, then your marriage is bound to fail.
All right, I think that's a great point to end on. I want to thank Pastor Dustin and Janine for going in this discussion, going in deeper about what we talked about yesterday. Thank you for tuning in. This is a really complex and extremely important topic. There's so many facets to it, some of which barely get touched on, or you just scratch the surface. And the purpose of this discussion was to go a little bit deeper and hit some points that maybe aren't discussed as often as maybe they should be. I hope you were able to get something out of it. Whether you're like me and you're single, you've been married for 10 years, you're newly married. There's something for everybody, I think. And I just want to thank you guys for tuning in and watching this discussion. We'll see you next time.